P-O-T-U-S. Potus is an acronym created by taking the first letter of each word in President of the United States. Now, it is said to have come into being in the 1890s as an abbreviation used by telegraph operators. So, keeping in mind that a new Potus will take charge on 20th, we decided to make a show, Potus 101, and share tidbits of accumulated information about presidents past and present. Let us begin at the end of the line with Joseph R. Biden, whose name will forever be listed now as the 46th Potus. Joseph R. Biden Jr. With almost half a century on the national political stage, Joe Biden is all set to achieve a decades-long dream of becoming the President of the United States. This wasn't Biden's first presidential race. In fact, this was his third. He first tried in 1988, but dropped out after allegations of plagiarism. He ended his second attempt in 2008 after garnering less than 1% in the crucial Iowa caucuses. Instead, within a few months, Biden embraced a new position.
Let me say it as simply as I can. Yes, I accept your nomination to run and serve with Barack Obama, the next President of the United States of America.
Known as middle-class Joe, Biden boasts of a record 4 decades in public office.
God bless you all.
First elected as a Newcastle County Councillor in 1970, he became the 6th youngest senator in American history when he was elected to the US Senate from Delaware in 1972. Later, he went on to be elected to the US Senate 5 more times. By the time he ran for 2020 Democratic nominations, he was the most recognizable face, boasted of a previous White House experience, and was seen as the front-runner. His personal life, too, touched a chord with the American public. Shortly after he won his first Senate race in 1972, Biden lost his first wife, Nelia, and a young daughter in a car accident. He famously took the oath of office for his first Senate term from the hospital room of his toddler sons, who survived the accident. Decades later, he faced another personal loss when his now 45-year-old younger son, Beau, succumbed to brain cancer. What could have broken a man didn't deter Biden. Instead, he gained considerable reputation as a kind, relatable family man who could lead well.
The best vice president America's ever had, Mr. Joe Biden.
In the past, former President Barack Obama called him the best vice president America has ever had. And in a recent interview with talk show host Oprah, the former president expressed relief and faith at America's choice of next president.
Joe is somebody who stood by me on every major decision I had for 8 years. He's become a brother, a genuinely good friend. Kamala is one of my earliest supporters when I first launched my presidency. So I'm personally invested in them. And they have the character and experience, I think, to do an outstanding job in a very difficult time, a very challenging time in this country. But beyond the personal investment I have in them, I think this gives us a chance to get back to the kind of competent, caring government that we so badly need. Last chance to
Biden's 8 years in the Obama White House allowed him to lay claim to much of Obama's legacy, spanning from accessible health care to stimulus package during the financial crisis. And in these unprecedented times, Biden sought to capitalize on his experience as a long-time Washington insider to run a successful campaign which cast him as the dependable and seasoned force in an increasingly chaotic world. Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. But what will a Biden presidency spell out for America and the world? The answer will be known when the first decisions of the new Potus starts making its way out of the Oval Office.
I sought this office to restore the soul of America, to rebuild the backbone of this nation, the middle class, and to make America respected around the world again, and to unite us here at home. It's the honor of my lifetime that so many millions of Americans have voted for that vision. And now, the work of making that vision is real. It's a task, the task of our time.
Now, let us talk about the new Potus. Yes, that's an acronym too, and it also exists, but it is not very popular. So getting on with the show, when Joe Biden, the then Democrat candidate, was looking for his running mate, not many thought a biracial 55-year-old woman would make it. But she saw, she came, and she conquered. The name Kamala Harris will go down in history as the United States' first ever woman vice president. And in the Madam Vice President-elect's own words, she certainly won't be the last.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
And with that, Kamala Harris, America's first female, first part South Asian, part Jamaican African, first colored Vice President-elect, certainly broke a glass ceiling, paving the way for perhaps a new multi-dimensional biracial face of political power in the United States of America. Born in Oakland to Jamaican father of African descent and Indian mother in 1964, Kamala Harris grew up in a world of activism at Oakland in California. Kamala and her sister Maya were raised by their single mother, Shyamala Gopalan, a cancer researcher and civil rights activist who had arrived in California in 1958. Oakland's black culture helped the sisters embrace their biracial identity. Harris won her first election in 2003 when she became San Francisco's district attorney. She was elected California's Attorney General in 2010, the first woman and black person to hold the job. In 2016, she became the first South Asian American to become a US Senator. It was in early 2019 that Harris launched her presidential campaign. She was one of the highest profile contenders in a crowded Democratic primary.
You chose Joe Biden as the next president of the United States of America.
Her presidential race came to an end when Harris withdrew from it in December 2019, 2 months before the first votes of the primary were cast. But in August 2020, with just 3 months to go for the elections, Biden picked Harris as his running mate. And on 7th of November 2020, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden successfully clinched the White House over President Donald Trump, marking this as a beginning of a new era of politics.
Had the audacity to break one of the most substantial barriers that exists in our country and select a woman as his vice president.
Well, now that we know all about Kamala Harris's connection with India, one might ask, when will she visit the country? That we still don't know. But what we do know for sure is that if and when she does, there is sure going to be a big hoo-ha about it. But instead of getting ahead in time, let us go back to a quick recap of Potus visits to India in the past. Over 60 years ago, the first ever visit of a Potus to India happened, when in 1959, President Dwight Eisenhower came on an official visit. It was a landmark event in the India-US relationship. President Eisenhower received an extravagant reception with a 21-gun salute at the New Delhi airport. And it was he who started the trend of visiting Agra to take a look at the Taj Mahal. Next came President Richard Nixon in the year 1969. President Nixon's visit was nothing like Eisenhower's because he spent less than a day in India. 9 years later, along comes President Jimmy Carter in January 1978. During his 3-day visit, Carter addressed the parliament and held several meetings with Indian politicians. Jimmy Carter and the First Lady visited a village near Delhi and gifted it a television set. The village is now known as Carterpuri in honor of the President's visit. During the 80s and the 1990s, no US President touched down on Indian soil. But after a gap of almost 2 decades during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's prime ministership, in the year 2000, US President Bill Clinton and his daughter Chelsea stayed in India for 5 days. President Clinton also addressed a joint parliament session.
Staff at the White House and a very large representation of members of our United States Congress from both political parties. We are all honored to be here, and we thank you for your warm welcome.
Clinton and his daughter visited several places in the country, including Gujarat. His trip signified the beginning of closer US-India strategic and economic ties. Bill Clinton's successor, George W. Bush, continued the embrace of India and shook hands with the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush visited India 6 years after Clinton. The left parties were against President Bush addressing the parliament, so he delivered a speech to a select audience at Purana Killa in Delhi.
Distinguished guests, namaste. Laura and I have been looking forward to this visit for a long time, and we're delighted to be in India.
Prime Minister Singh and President Bush finalized the framework of the nuclear deal, which allowed India to pursue nuclear commerce. Then in 2010, Manmohan Singh hosted another Potus, when Barack Obama said namaste to India for the very first time. During that visit, President Obama pressed all the right buttons. His statements on a bilateral relationship, anti-terrorism measures, and business opportunities struck the right chords.
Independence, a world without nuclear weapons.
During his 2010 visit, Obama spent a significant amount of time in Mumbai, played hopscotch, danced with kids, and attended parties lit by the presence of Bollywood stars. 5 years later, President Obama was welcomed on Indian soil by Prime Minister Modi.
President Barack Obama arrives at Rajpath, being greeted very warmly by Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Obama was invited as the chief guest at India's 66th Republic Day celebrations. But the image from that tour that became legendary was the bromance on display. And for the first time on international stage, Prime Minister Modi made tea. The two leaders issued a joint statement after tea to mark the visit and strengthened Indo-US ties.
In the last few years, trade between our two countries has increased by some 60% toward a record $100 billion. We want to trade even more. So we welcome the reforms that the Prime Minister is pursuing to make it easier to do business here in India.
President Obama also tried to charm Indians by pulling off a popular Bollywood dialogue.
Señorita, bude, desho me. You know what I mean. So,
Potus 101 is about half done, and ask anyone who likes eggs sunny side up. It's interesting, right? Till the end. So hang in there, because this commercial break won't last for long. We still have a lot of Potus stuff to catch up on. Before Donald Trump began throwing tantrums in the White House, there had been 44 previous Potuses leading the USA, spanning a period of over 200 years. Some of them had colorful escapades. Others had taken their country into wars. They have dropped bombs, killing millions. They have sent man to the moon. Fortunes of humanity have often depended on how and what a Potus does. So here is a short collection of some impactful Potuses from history.
I'll be talking to you tomorrow. Thank you.
2 centuries before President-elect Biden takes his oath, the United States of America, the world's first modern democracy, elected its first president. America's founding fathers decided that one elected civilian, the US president, would lead the executive branch of the federal government, a governmental structure that has remained in place for more than 200 years. And so, George Washington took the presidential oath on the balcony of New York City's Federal Hall on April 30th, 1789. From then to now, Donald Trump as the 45th and Biden to be the 46th President of the United States, the post of Potus has emerged as the most powerful political office in the world. While some of them went a little overboard, a few others were loved by the public, not just in the USA, but worldwide. After George Washington charted history, President Andrew Jackson became the only president to have been a prisoner of war. He has been on the $20 bill since 1928 and is known for founding the Democratic Party. In 1857, James Buchanan announced during his inaugural address that he would not run for a second term. He stayed true to his word, which may have been the right decision, as he is often ranked as one of the worst presidents in US history. But that was before Donald Trump could get counted. President Abraham Lincoln led America during the Civil War and ironically signed legislation creating the Secret Service hours before his assassination. President Franklin D. Roosevelt brought America out of the Great Depression. He led the US into World War II, and by the end of his unprecedented 4th term, he laid the groundwork for the United Nations. Roosevelt won a record 4 presidential elections while successfully hiding his physical handicap from the public. After President Roosevelt died in office, Vice President Harry S. Truman took charge. And during his 2 terms as the Potus, USA dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, initiated the Marshall Plan to help Europe's economic recovery after the devastation of the Second World War, and formulated what is known as the Truman Doctrine, the posturing that set off the Cold War. Under President Truman, USA also embarked on the Korean War. The youngest ever President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was very popular both at home and abroad, At his inaugural speech, he famously said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country."
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
During his time in office, USA increased their military intervention in Vietnam, though mostly in the advisory capacity. John F. Kennedy announced before a special joint session of Congress the dramatic and ambitious goal of sending an American safely to the moon before the end of the decade, something that he would not be able to see. On November 22, 1963, when he was hardly past his first 1,000 days in office, Kennedy was shot to death as his motorcade wound through Dallas, Texas. Despite improving relations with the Soviet Union and China and the conclusion of the Vietnam War, President Nixon is known primarily for the Watergate scandal and his resignation, the only president to have done so. Bill Clinton's presidency was one political crisis after the other. In 1993, Clinton and his First Lady Hillary were the subject of a Justice Department investigation into the so-called Whitewater controversy, a botched business deal from their days in Arkansas. In 1994, Clinton was sued for sexual harassment when he had been governor of Arkansas. It was then that the Monica Lewinsky case of sexual misconduct within the White House emerged. The two cases eventually led to his impeachment in 1998. President Clinton saved his office when he went public and apologized to America for having lied.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible.
After President Clinton's colorful tenure, George W. Bush took charge, and then began America's tryst with terrorism. President Bush was in office when the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center went down in ashes and dirt. President Bush announced a world coalition against terror with the words, "Either you are with us or against us." He led the US into war and occupation in Afghanistan and Iraq. When President Bush's 2 terms came to an end, Barack Obama made history as the first African-American President of the United States, Potus.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
Obama took charge after the 2008 economic crisis and is credited for keeping the economy thriving during his 2 terms. It was during President Obama's time in the office that the 9/11 funder Osama bin Laden was captured and executed by the US Army. Obama's popularity ratings remained high throughout his term in office. This is Potus 101, and that is all that can fit into it, I'm sorry to say. If you want more information, the internet is there. Go search for yourself. We can only do this much. Sorry.